Hello, I'm John from Pure Unintentional ASMR. This is our first ever unintentional interview. About 2 weeks ago, I put a poll up on our YouTube channel asking you who would you like to see us interview. It was a slightly disingenuous poll as this interview had already been arranged, but I knew what the answer would be and it was unanimous. So I have travelled from the west coast of Canada to the centre of England to Bakewell to meet my first ever guest who needs absolutely no introduction on my channel. We're in the same venue from the original interviewer. We have the same cameraman. We have a much worse interviewer, but most importantly, we have John Butler here again. John, thank you so much for doing this. I have many questions for you, but the first, I believe when you did that interview with Ian McNay on Conscious TV, you were very reluctant to do it. You didn't want the publicity.
No.
So how does that feel, knowing that this was not something you ever really wanted?
Well, at first I was bewildered and what does it feel like? Well, I don't really feel anything, really. Yes, I think I could say that if it's been of interest, what I'm glad is that I've been able to share what I love. And that makes me feel humbly grateful.
I mean, it's essentially the size of a packed out Wembley arena watching your videos, subscribing to you. I guess that doesn't sink in when you're...
Doesn't really sink in, dear.
I don't know how many people's lives you've changed, and I'm very conscious that you are a very humble man. You don't like to consider yourself a teacher. Yeah. You talk about ego and the problems that ego brings to people. I don't want to make your problem worse, but you have most certainly changed my life. When I first came across your interview with Ian McNay on Conscious TV back in, it was February of 2018 when I first came across it, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. It was the biggest challenge I had. I've had a lot of challenges in my life, but figuring out what I wanted to do with my life was the number one. And through your video and this completely accidental thing, I now have a calling that I never could have imagined. So that's it. Just a thank you to you for that.
Well, let's say thanks be to God and be safe.
Be to God indeed. You seem to be a man that's very in tune with yourself and with nature. Did that come naturally, or is that something you've had to work on?
Well, I've always felt close to nature. I was brought up in the country and I've spent most of my active years as a farmer, so nothing's more natural for me than to be working alone in the fields. I never liked machinery. I like to work by hand. So to be hour after hour after hour alone, silent in the field, which I loved, working with the plants and the earth, which I loved, that comes to me very naturally. I still take great comfort from looking at the grass. I love to touch the earth. The second part of your question was what, dear? Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, just how you came to the place, basically. How did you come to finding stillness?
Oh, you asked me, was I at rest with myself?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that was more difficult. I went through all a young man's agonies. No, in fact, I was probably more mixed up than most people are even today. Tormented by questions of what I should do between duty, what was right, or what I felt was selfish. The social attitude, the social approach to these things has changed very much in my lifetime. I was brought up, none of the self questions that are now so widespread, self-development, self-fulfillment, none of this was ever considered. It was all about being unselfish. This was the only mention of self I'd ever heard of was being selfish or unselfish. And of course, selfishness was one of the worst things you could be, self-centered. And in many ways, because I didn't really, I also felt a misfit in society. I never really felt very comfortable in the world of man. I always wanted to escape back to my beloved fields, really. So I felt a bit of a social failure. And so this caused me much difficulty when I was a young man. That's through much of my life, this sense of not really living up to what was expected of me. It's the most bizarre happening that completely unexpectedly and against my wishes, in later age I find myself as a public figure. It was...
Does it give you any comfort that, when you thought, I think I've had the same experience, we all think we're misfits, we don't belong.
Yes.
I feel like everyone has a lesson that we didn't learn.
Well, actually, in some ways, you see, as I've become, I'm a bit shy to use words like spiritual, but as it always seems to me a presumption, an unworthy presumption. But insofar as spirit has become more real to me, that shows up, you see, what I like to call sin, which is the dark side of human nature. So in many ways, the more spiritually developed we are, the more we also realize the shadow side, which you can call sin. And so I'm more aware of my failings now than I am of my successes, so-called successes, which is a very good state to be in. And humility is hopefully a consequence of that. Because after all, if the aim is towards this infinite something that we refer to God as God, what is man? Man doesn't measure up very well, does he? So, yeah.
So yeah, you were talking about, or you have talked in your books and with Ian McNay about there were times when you needed to escape, you needed to get away from the situation you were in. And I think a lot of people feel like that. A lot of people feel trapped. They feel like there's no other way out. And then there are times where things are hard and we feel like running away and escaping when we shouldn't. We should stay. There are certain things worth fighting for. And I wondered, in your life, how did you decide whether it was worth staying or leaving? When did you know that it was the
I
right
don't think
time
you
to?
do know, dear. I think we muddle through, and I think moments of clarity are quite rare. I think most of the time we don't know which way to go, and maybe sometimes things happen. I don't know that I really decided almost anything in my life. Things happen, don't they? And it's extraordinary looking back. Have I decided anything of consequence in my life? I'm not sure I have. I think things have just happened, really, for better or worse. Escaping, well, that for me was always just, if it was a room full of talkative people, often it meant just going outside. Yes, I've gone abroad. I never got scared for civilization. I remember as a young man, one of my dreams, I had two dreams: to be a cowboy and to see the world before men messed it up. And I was very lucky. Dad sent me out to Australia, where I did both. I remember climbing a hill in Australia, looking all around, and no sign that man had ever been there. Strangely enough, it didn't quite come up to expectations. I suppose I'd been pretty near that situation for quite a long period beforehand. And Yes, I love the old song, "Don't Fence Me In." That's been a guiding instinct throughout my life. I find I get claustrophobic really in big cities, or I used to get claustrophobic in big cities, or people talking. It's long to get out. Well, sometimes you can, sometimes you just have to open the door, or open the window, get a breath of fresh air, do what's available, do what's possible.
If circumstances were different, and let's say you had a family living in a city, for work you needed to live in a city,
Yes, yes.
how do you think you would approach finding stillness without that connection to nature?
Well, stillness is something that came much later in life, John. I didn't find stillness until many, many years past. I didn't call it stillness. Stillness has become another rather fashionable word in spiritual talk. For me, it was just nature. Nature is naturally quiet, isn't it? And when you look at a tree, for example, it naturally brings you to something you could call stillness, at least in relation to normal human condition of agitation. Look at the grass, that immediately, or look at the earth, because the earth is still, isn't it? So the easiest way to find stillness is just keep your feet on the ground. Perfect stillness, bingo, no problem.
But how did you know when you first
Naturally, dear.
you just
Naturally, you just feel better.
do you think you were experiencing it before then? Like, was there a time when you just recognized it and was like, oh, that's what stillness is, or that's
Well, I think it was really only when complicated people started talking to me about it that what's always seemed obvious sort of got a name and a label. It became, how do you find stillness? Up to then, I don't think it ever occurred to me. It was just natural, common sense. Honestly, you know, men make it all so complicated. Once you start writing books and talking to people, talking, invariably takes you away from common sense. Because once you start talking, you get into the head and you lose contact with, first of all, the ground, Mother Earth. You don't see what's in front of your nose. You don't hear what's naturally the sounds of nature around you, and all you live in a man-made world, a man-made world in this bubble or in this prison of your own mind. This becomes your reality, and there's no common sense in there. Common sense requires feeling, seeing, and hearing. They're our main senses, aren't they? And when you're thinking, you're not connected with any of them, are you? Talking, you may listen to the sound of your own voice, but what use is that? First of all, you see like what's in front of you, but then if you keep looking, you see deeper into it. And before you know where you are, you're realizing that you're sitting in silence. We're talking in silence. You're connected to perfect peace through your feet on the ground. Well, what's this? Presence. Presence of what? Presence of infinite peace, infinite life, infinite love, spirit, God. How to find God? Common sense, my dear.
that's a very good one. That's very good. I wanted to ask you more about the ego. If you found fame, I mean fame, if you want to put it that way, but later in life, if you had found fame at, let's say, 25, if you had become a YouTuber at 25, do you think it would have affected you differently? The attention, the people coming to interview you, and
Perhaps I never would have been at 25. It's maybe at 25 I made the great mistake of thinking I knew. Now I'm old, I have more confidence in saying I don't know.
It's a hard thing to admit for most people.
I'm more ready to admit my stupidity, my human ignorance.
Modern technology was something I wanted to ask you about. We live in a world of smartphones, the internet, everyone's connected constantly. It distracts us, it causes anxiety with people, comparing yourself to everyone else. But on the other hand, then, technology has allowed people like ourselves to make a living, and also you can now reach people that you would never have been able to reach, and people are able to access people like yourselves from all corners of the earth that they would never have been able to before. So I wondered, how do you ever think about that modern technology, or about how it impacts us, both good and bad? If you have any opinion on it.
I don't do much thinking these days at all, strange to say. When people ask me what I think, I'm always a bit floored by that question, and I think somewhere along the way I've just got bored with thinking. It's so much, I think, simpler really to go beyond thinking. This is what meditation does. It takes you. You see, thinking is just a layer of consciousness, like here. I don't think much about what's happening in my tummy. My tummy is sort of digesting whatever I put into it today, and it more or less takes place by itself. But what I've come to realize gradually over the years is that my head, my mind, is really like a sort of mental digestive system, just digesting what's ever come into it. And it's a sort of fairly robotic thing. It just chews over what's in the news, what people have said. And I think I just got a bit bored with it, really. And you see, it's so much more interesting beyond the mind, really. That's where the big stuff is. This don't fence me in. It always sort of leads me to the stars more, you know. I've just recently been lucky enough to be at sea for a few days and look out over the sea, and it's so big, and mind and attention is drawn to the horizon where the sea merges into the sky, and then beyond that into the infinite, you know. And in contrast, the ship seems so small, like a little prison there of people talking, and human entertainment, and all that's encompassed by the world of man. How small it is in comparison to the greatness of life. And perhaps I've just been greedy. I've always longed for the greatness, freedom, for infinite love, the love that never says no. So I'm just naturally, they say God calls, respond to that call. And when people say, what do you think? It sort of brings me back into a world I've more or less grown out of, thank God.
Makes sense, yeah.
I don't find much interest really in the world of thinking any longer. I've left it behind somewhere.
That's great. I feel.
And on the other hand, you see, this is, as it were, after thinking, and before thinking, well, common sense, my dear. If you use your common sense, your mind is perfectly quiet, totally quiet. If you're doing something with attention, even if it's just peeling an apple, or washing up, or scratching your head, if you do it with attention, you'll find your mind is perfectly quiet. You're not thinking. The trouble is we don't do things with attention. We're usually divided, you know, thinking And that's why there's so little craftsmanship today, and most of what you see produced is shoddy, is careless. See, people dress carelessly, don't they? It has always become fashionable to be dressed carelessly, casually we call it. Casualness has become, well, that's another word for inattention, very, very, well, maybe that's stretching the point a bit, but yes. I love the phrase TLC, tender loving care, which implies attention, really attending to something, carefully, working carefully, taking care of things.
Yeah.
Which is natural. It's not a thinking process, is it? It's living carefully, giving attention.
But how do you, I mean, it might seem very easy for you, or this might seem like a silly question, but I'm someone who overthinks constantly. I
yes.
think and think and think. And I, at the moment anyway, I don't know any other way of being.
No. Well, I'm afraid that's a very common situation today, this mental hyperactivity. And it's a great problem for many people. How do you overcome it? Well, not everybody will dedicate themselves to serious meditation, but it's very simple. I've got no better advice, dear, than common sense. Let's come back to feet on the ground. If we were 100% aware, you'd be so full of light, you might even explode. We just don't know what it is to be aware. You might even find something glorious. Just to look at something.
I think that's a lot of the success of ASMR has come from attention.
Yes.
People love the kind of personal attention.
Absolutely. Yes, I think it's very much connected, John. What brings us? It's about coming to rest. Now, most of us know a bit about physical rest. We call it relaxation. What we know less about is mental rest. What is rest? It's really letting go, isn't it? You can't stop the mind because it's digesting the process. You can't stop your tummy digesting. No more can you stop your mind. People waste a lot of time trying to control the mind, but what you can do is let go your attachment to the mind. I use the phrase just get bored with it, or just find something better, find something more interesting. If you're thinking and your dog comes up, wanting a bit of affection, and you stroke your dog, if you stroke your dog, or your little child, maybe a better example, your child comes up, wants attention, and you just take him in your arms, give him a cuddle, and you'll find your mind becomes restful. At least if you do it with full attention. And if you do it with half attention, neither your dog nor your child will be satisfied. It wants daddy's attention, total, doesn't it? Daddy's or mummy's attention. Child, you can't deceive him. He knows, so does the dog. Now, your question was how to deal with the mind. Well, of course I can talk all day about meditation, but really common sense. In fact, one of my more successful videos is called Common Sense Meditation. And it's explaining just exactly what I'm trying to say now. That just listening, looking, and feeling your feet on the ground is as effective as anything. You don't need to go to some guru in India and dress up in robes and incense and do all those sort of things. Here and now, exactly where you are. That which you seek is right here now, in the present moment. You can never be closer to God than here and now.
Yeah, makes some sense. Yeah. I guess I wanted to ask you about ASMR for a moment, if you don't mind.
No, of course.
Obviously, that's my audience.
Sorry, I didn't. Yeah,
No, you're
I
good.
didn't get the point. Sorry, I wandered off.
No,
I'm trying to do that. Well, you see, ASMR. I don't know about the tingling aspect. I've never experienced that, but I know a lot about coming to rest. Going to sleep is very similar to meditation. And here I'm talking about a bit more than just the first few steps in meditation, because both bring the mind to rest. When you fall asleep, you go to a lower state of consciousness, not complete unconsciousness, but the mind comes to rest, at least when you're not dreaming, deep sleep. In meditation, the same thing happens, but instead of falling asleep, you fall awake to a higher level of consciousness, where similarly the mind is at rest. It leaves mental activity behind, rather like an aeroplane leaves the clouds behind. You see, the mind is like clouds, and sometimes it's so thick you can't see anything but clouds. You quite forget about the blue sky, the infinite blue sky beyond. But what happens? You get in an aeroplane, and you leave the busy airport, all the chaos of the world, go up, bless my soul, beyond the clouds, there's the skies and the infinite sky. You look down, oh, it's just clouds. That's meditation. And the meditation is just like an airplane. It takes you through the clouds of the mind into that. So you have rest from the mind. Just like when you go to sleep, you've had rest from the mind. But there you go down. In meditation, you go up to a higher level of consciousness. In sleep, you go to a lower level of consciousness. So maybe just because I've spent so much of my life in meditation, practiced so much and so long, something in my just general what I conveys that rest to the mind, that for those who are looking for an ASMR experience to help them go to sleep, has that effect. So I see the two as very similar, really. Either way, depending what your aim, if you want to go to sleep, it's splendid. Meditation is very helpful. In fact, many people, when they meditate, very difficult to tell whether you're asleep or meditating. I'm not sure myself, which it is sometimes.
When you first discovered ASMR, that there was people listening to ASMR, how did you feel? Was
I
it?
had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
I was with Phil, the man that makes my videos. Neither of us knew what it was. Then gradually we met a few people who told us a bit about it, and suddenly it all began to make sense to me, particularly the going to sleep side, because it's all to do with rest. Yes, we don't know much about mental rest, really. We've become sort of so habituated to mental unrest, restlessness. The world is characterized by restlessness, isn't it? And people go to great effort to try to find peace. They forget that peace is underneath their feet. Nothing could be simpler than finding peace. But we are sort of rather like we're addicted to agitation and not being present. We're absent from presence, you see. We're absent from whatever you call present, just being here and now, expand it into the presence of God. You see, we're absent. We're not present, and this is this is the base of our problems. We're lost sheep, absent. So we need to come back home to presence, which is here and now.
And you weren't, when you first heard that people were using your videos for sleep, let's say, even though I have to say the biggest comment on my channel and on your videos as well is, I came for sleep,
Yeah.
but I stayed for the wisdom. And most people say they cannot sleep through your videos because their mind, they're just thinking about all the things you're talking about. I mean, that must be, I guess, I mean, to me, that's the highest compliment you could give somebody in your position.
Really?
That people come to fall asleep, but they're so engaged with what they're listening to. And your voice is so relaxing, and you're the way you speak and everything about you. But what you're talking about is so engaging, and like even just sitting here, like I've learned so many new things that I just did not know. Like it's common sense to you, and it's common sense when I hear it, but I don't that doesn't it doesn't enter my brain. I need someone like you to say it. Tell me.
Extraordinary, isn't it? Amazing, really. Amazing.
I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned Phil, Phil Shanklin, your right hand man. I believe he came across one of your books in Sheffield, and he came for a visit, and you guys went and meditated, and then he decided to move here. How does that feel? I find it hard to get some of my friends to even come and visit me, and yet you had a man that doesn't even know you come and move beside you so he could meditate with you and help you with your channel. How does that feel? Is it? There's something about you that people just want to be near you and
It's been a puzzle to me for many years. Why I've often said to him, why do people come? What do they come for? I couldn't think what they came for. And then I remember on one occasion I asked someone who'd been here a few times, and I said to you, why do you come? And she thought a bit and then said, nothing. And that's why some people call me Mr. Nothing. I rather like that. I think it's a good description, because I don't feel I have anything really to give to people. It seems so obvious to me now that we live in this world of sort of these sort of objects, of this transitory objects of this world that comes to pass. This world which is like crystallized, the crystallized precipitation of the invisible world. The real world, you see, is this infinite presence, spirit. And this has fallen to a lower state of consciousness, rather like rain falls from the sky. First of all, you have water vapor, then it forms clouds. The clouds fall as rain. The rain forms puddles and rivers and things. And then in winter, it freezes. We're really living in a world of frozen or crystallized spirit. And that's why we are locked into solid, separate, broken fragments called separation, separate people. Millions of separate fragments of the one primal, one undivided spirit. Because the sky is not divided, is it? The sky is one sky. So it's spirit. God's one. Unity.
Yeah, one thing that struck me is you've talked a few times about having a few profound spiritual experiences throughout your life. I wondered if you could maybe tell us about one of those for a minute, or your favorite one.
Again, I find this rather a difficult question. Most of my life has been a multitude of sort of very mini realizations, really. I think anyone that's really interested better read my books because they are recorded. Because even from quite a young man, I suppose everybody has these rather special moments, and I happened to write them down on anything I had handy at the time, and that's really what's developed into my 10 books. Yes, I'm not one of these people that had a mind-blowing experiences, really. Well, maybe I've had one or two. But most of my life it's just been a little gradual, step-by-step progress, unfoldment. There was an occasion when I was 40 years ago now, when I remember first looking into the eyes of a woman and seeing into the infinite beyond. That was a big moment for me. Yes, I speak easily now about the infinite beyond. It seems obvious to me now, but I suppose up till the age of my middle 40s it wasn't as obvious.
And when that happened, did you know instantly what you were looking at?
No, I was completely thrown by it. I was sort of suddenly thrown into another world. It seemed like another world to me then, and I found it very difficult. For many years I was very lost in between sort of this world and out of this world. Yes, it took me many years to bring the two together really comfortably. I went through many years of really dreadful depression. At one time I seriously thought I was going mad. Yes, it was a dreadful time. I look back on it with horror, really. And when people write to me or speak to me of their own despair, yes, I've known it too. I know all about the darkness. I'm thankful now, because unless you do, you don't understand. You've got to understand. I think to reach a stage of completion, you need to know as much about the darkness as you do the light. We grow through our suffering, our mistakes. They're there for a purpose. I've no doubt about that now.